I wanted to know what your impressions are about Indian football over the sort of past 6 years since ISL started. How do you see how do you think it has grown?
Actually, it's a great question because a lot of people look at the ISL as sort of the revolution that came about, and
Yeah,
rightly so in so many ways. If you talk to the football players in India, they'd also tell you how professionalism
yeah,
took a completely different meaning once the ISL came about. Obviously, in the initial couple of years, it was about seeing Del Piero in action,
yeah.
getting himself. I was at the stadium when Del Piero got himself on, I think around the 37th or the 38th minute in the Delhi game.
Wow.
And so, I mean, the initial attraction was seeing the Del Pieros, the Robert Pires, the Ljungbergs, the Trezeguets of the world, Marco in Chennai, Ilano, and all
Berbatov.
of these guys. Berbatov later on as well, yeah, absolutely. Tim Cahill, now very good colleague who we continue to stay in touch with. Uh,
Wow.
but I think if you really look at the start of the decade, which is sort of 2011, when we made it to the Asian Cup for the first time in 27 years, if I'm right, 1984, when last time we made it. That
Okay.
for me was sort of the change of
Turning
guard
point.
in many, yeah, in many ways, Kush, because I think people underestimate the contribution sometimes that the likes of I am Vijayan and Joe Paul Ancheri and Mahesh Gauli as a great centre back. Somebody we're still struggling to replace actually in so many
Yeah.
ways. Renedy Singh and Baichung Bhutia. And that was sort of the passing of the baton in so many ways to the Sunil Chhetris of the world. And now
That
we talk
transition
about,
period, that strong transition period.
yeah, and so that 2011 Asian Cup, even though to be fair, we did get battered, but when you play at that stage is when you
Yeah.
learn. I mean,
Yeah.
you can read books and theories and you can watch as many analysis programs with Anant Tyagi and Paul Macefield and whoever else. But at the end of the day, there's nothing like being on the ground and experiencing
Competing at that
it.
level. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I think the growth, you could clearly see the growth in that Qatar game for the World Cup qualifier where we held on for
Yeah.
a nil-nil draw.
Yeah, growth and the maturity, because you
Yeah.
know that you might not be able to force a result against a side like this, and you're missing Sunil Chetri in that game in any
Yeah.
case. And let's not forget there was a context to that Qatar game. I'm sorry, I'm going to be jumping topics like
Now,
that because you keep
go for
refreshing
it.
my
Go for
memory.
it. Go for it.
But Indian players actually landed in different batches. They
Yeah.
landed at different times. They barely had time to prepare, let alone the physical preparedness for a game like that. And we
Yeah.
lost Chetri before the contest. So these guys were, I won't say jet lagged, but they've been through a very arduous sort of a journey to get to Doha in the first place.
Yeah.
And then, although the players themselves confessed that because of the cooling in the stadium, which is something that you'll see in the World Cup of 2022 as well, um, is great. But at the same time, you have never been at that stage. And
Yeah.
those guys have, they're Asian champions. They've scored against every opposition that has come in front of them, and to be able to not just hold on to a draw, but to not concede against them, we were a bit lucky as well. But it is something else. And you're absolutely right. But that confidence comes from years and years of being at that level, playing at that level as well. And I always go back to that Asian Cup for that very reason, because
2011. Yeah.
the
The turning
2011, and
point.
then of course the ISL comes about, and it's like a massive affair. Suddenly, the dressing rooms are spick and span. The pitches are great. The coaches are of a completely different standard. Yes, even though the international players are sort of in the dusk of their careers, but
Yeah.
the experiences that they're bringing into that dressing room. Imagine a Del Piero talking to somebody like an Adil Khan who's in the same Delhi team, and now Adil Khan is playing for the national team.
Yeah.
Imagine a Trezeguet talking to Preetham Kotal, or it's an experience that you can't
Just
purchase with
the mentorship that you get in terms of how you should train, how you should live, what you should focus on a daily
Yeah,
basis. Yeah.
absolutely. So I know there's a lot of criticism of how a lot of international players landed up in the dusk of their careers, but at the end of the day, you got to share a dressing room. You ask Anirudh Thapa
Yeah.
about his initial experiences of sharing a dressing room of Chennai FC, and was left awestruck by a lot of these guys. So yeah, so you get to learn so much, provided you're willing to learn. And I think that's the other
Definitely.
transition we've seen in Indian football: the willingness to learn, not just taking a paycheck and going back home and saying, right, okay,
Yeah.
now I get my plot of land and I set up my shop and I'm good to go for the rest of
Yeah.
my life.
Definitely.
No, look at Sunil Chetri. He's gone vegan. He's even in the off season, he doesn't stop working. How can I try to be like this? I think that awareness was there, but that mentality to replicate the success that some of your stars are having was possibly not there. But I think it's a good mix that we're seeing now with the money coming in for players as well, along with the
Definitely.
awareness and the willingness to change and reform as footballers.